So let's get started with drawing our hole profile. What shape are the holes? Well, yeah, okay. It's a circle. And in order to draw a circle, we need to start a sketch. We're going to come up to the sketch button. We have our sketch window. We need to select a sketch plane. Now before, we selected the top plane. But you'll notice that if we select the top plane this time, our circles, our sketch, are going to live inside of the rectangle. That's not the end of the world, but let me just say it's going to be a little bit problematic, right? So where do we click? Right? It's not going to be the front, and it's certainly not going to be the right. Where do we click? Well, the really neat thing about CAD, if this is what gets you excited, is the fact that when we build planar objects, like a rectangular prism, like we have here, right, you'll notice that I can now select the faces of the rectangle. So since they're planar, they are planes themselves, and when we click on the top plane of the rectangle, right, you'll see that it's now floating above on the face of the rectangle. We have face of Extrude 1 selected. Very cool. Okay, so we created our new geometry by extruding this rectangular prism here, and now we can build off of it. Right? Okay, I'm going to align my view. This time, instead of using the view normal to sketch plane, I'm going to use another option to just click on the top of the navigation cube. Whatever boats your float. Right? And now we need to draw our circles. So I'm just going to let you do this, and you can follow along with me. I'm going to come up here, choose the default circle, and I'm going to very deliberately draw one circle about where it needs to be, and one circle very much not where it needs to be. There we go. Perfect. Okay, well, no, I intentionally drew these very disproportionate and out of line because I want to see when these things are correct, right? If I draw them really close and then I use dimensions to, refine their position and their size, it's going to be hard to tell if things have changed, right? So let me show you why I chose this. So what needs to be true about these circles? Well, first thing is that these two circles need to have the same diameter, or circumference, or radius, or whatever. They need to be the same size, right? And then also, the centers of these circles need to be symmetric about this line, right? And what is this line? Well, it's the front plane, right? Okay, so in order to do that, rather than using the dimensioning tool, I want to pull your attention over to these icons. Now, your screen might be a little bit smaller, right? If you're using a smaller window, or if you're not using the full screen like I am, this might be in a little drop-down menu headed by this icon. But what are these? Well, if we hover over them, you'll notice it says, let's see, coincident, concentric, parallel, tangent, horizontal, vertical, perpendicular, equal. Ooh, interesting. What is equal? Constrain two or more lines to have equal lengths, or arcs to have equal radii. Hey, that sounds exactly like what we need. What these are up here are called constraints. The dimensioning tool is a special kind of constraint. It actually has numbers associated with it. But these are going to help us create more general constraints on our geometry. So if I choose the equal constraint, I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to click on the edge of one of these circles. Then I'm going to click on the edge of the second circle, and pow! Okay. See, this is why I chose to draw those two circles very disproportionately sized from each other, right? When they became the same size, it was very obvious of that change, right? And now, I've pressed escape to get out of the equals tool. If I click and drag the outsides of one of these circles, very cool. You'll notice that they now change size together. So no matter what the size is, it's not constrained to a number, but we know that these two circles are the same size, and that's important, right? Okay, very good. So we hit the same size constraint using the equal constraint. Now which constraint can we use to make sure that these two circles are symmetric about the front plane? Aha! This one that looks like two E's or two 3's looking at each other across a mirror. It says symmetric. Okay, so let's read this real quick. Pre-select a line or linear edge and the two other geometries of the same type. Well, okay, let's say that that doesn't make sense, because it kind of doesn't. If we click on this, what do we need? We can either click on both of the outsides of the circles, or both of the insides of the circles. Let's click on the insides, 1 and 2. But then what else do we need? Well, we need to select the line that divides them. So when we click here, on the front edge, pop, you'll notice that that circle has moved to mirror itself across this line. Very cool. And if we click and drag the center of one of these circles, hey, look at that. It dances together in a beautiful lockstep. Okay. Well, very good. So all we need to do is do this 2 or 3 more times, right, for the other circles. Well, no. Okay. Admittedly, for those of you who have seen, these kinds of tools before, you're probably screaming in your head, Mo, why would you do this? This is the hard way. And you're right. But I did want an excuse to show you what constraints are, because constraints are one of the most important vocabulary terms that I'll teach you today with respect to CAD. There is a tool up here. It looks like 2 L's facing one another. It may be in a little drop-down menu if your screen is smaller and your resolution and your toolbar has been condensed. But this mirror tool, when we click on it, hey, it gives us some blue text. So first we need to select a mirror line. Right? How about this vertical line? Hey, look at that. It's the right plane. We made a really good decision before by modeling about the origin, and this is where it's paying off, right? The fact that we modeled our rectangle about the origin means that we can take advantage of these planes when we're building future sketches. If our rectangle had been built up here, right, off to the edge, or even not centered at all, right, we would have had to make new geometry to make these, mirrors and these, symmetries across the center lines. But back to the mirror tool. When we click on this right plane, it's now asking us to select the entities to be mirrored. So let's click on this circle and this circle, and bada bing, bada boom, we've got it. Right? If I click and drag the center of one of these circles, all 4 of them dance. It's beautiful. And if we click and drag the outsides of these circles, they all expand and contract in sync. Very cool. All right. So, last thing that we need to do, well, with any sketch, we need to make sure that we constrain in all ways, right? And that means adding dimensions. We don't want to leave this decision of how big these circles are based just on how close we got with our eyes, right? So, if we choose the dimensioning tool, and we come down here, I want you to click on the center of the circle. Oh, wait, pause, hold on. I just clicked on the center of the circle with the dimensioning tool. But when I move, there's no bubble, right? Well, what gives? So think about this. If I click with the dimensioning tool on a point, what are the dimensions of the point? There are no dimensions of a point, right? That's just geometry, right? There are no dimensions to a point. We need to create a dimension between this point and something else. How about the top edge? When we click on that, you'll notice it's not asking us how wide the edge is. It's saying between the thing that you clicked first and the thing you clicked second, what is the dimension? So let's drop this bubble here, and let's choose 0.5. Okay? So the circles are going to contract a little bit and move around. That's fine, but they're all going to move at the same amount. Let's do the same thing over here with respect to the left side. And in fact, we can come down here because we know that all of these circles are locked together, right? So if we choose the center point here and the right side of the rectangle, let's also do 0.5 inches. Right? Okay, something very subtle, but very important has happened. Can you see what it is? For those of you observant types, you may notice that the centers of these circles have turned black, where they used to be blue. Well, before we get into this, let's just keep going, right? Let's not bother with this too much. Right? We need to now say how big the circle is, right? And so I'm just going to click on this one over here. I'm just going to click once on the outside of the circle. I'm going to drop my balloon out here, and I'm going to say 0.5, and interesting, now everything is black. What has happened? Well, you'll notice that if I try and click and drag these circles now, they won't move. And furthermore, if I were to erase one of these constraints, let's say the right edge constraint, you'll notice that if I click and drag the center of the circle left and right, that's fine. But if I try and drag it up and down, well, it won't, right? And that makes sense. This thing and all of the circles inside are constrained to be 0.5 inches away from their respective edges, at least top to bottom. But now that there's no left or right constraint, we have this free motion of our circles in the left to right direction. We have a degree of freedom that has not been accounted for. So rather than redrawing the dimension, since I already had it before and I erased it, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose undo a few times to get my dimension back. And this is the goal. For every sketch that we make, we want to make sure that all of our sketch lines are fully constrained. And that means we want all of our sketch lines to be black. Now, in different CAD programs, right, be they SolidWorks or Autodesk Inventor or whatever, the color coding scheme is different. But we know that there is a difference between the unconstrained color of lines and the constrained color of lines. And this is where we want to be for every one of our sketches, right? This is what defines a professional sketch from an amateur sketch. Okay, so now that we are fully constrained and all of our holes are ready to be drilled, let's click that green checkbox. All right, I'm going to move my view to an isometric view so I can see this 3D action that I'm about to conduct. And I'm going to come back up here to extrude, right? This is a three-dimensional action. I'm going to extrude these holes through, right? So I'm going to click on each of these holes now in order, right? Here's one, here's another, and oh, I missed. Okay, don't panic, right? If you miss, you'll notice that I accidentally clicked on the inside of this rectangle, right? So all of this material is being extruded. I can press Control Z, or I can just click on it again, right? It's a toggle feature, don't panic, right? We're just going to come back in here and we're going to click on the outsides of these circles. And, oh no, this is terrible. We have a dead turtle. How sad. Well, so we don't want a dead turtle. We want holes, right? And so one might naturally think, well, let's reverse the direction. When we reverse the direction, looks like we're drilling holes. And just to make sure that we're completely through all of the way through this brick, right? Let's click and drag this line down here. Oh no. Oh no. Zombie turtle. The only thing worse than a dead turtle is a zombie turtle. Alright, enough about these turtles, Mo. What gives? Well, the thing is that you'll notice that we are adding material here. And if you look for that word up in our extrude tool, there are modes to our extrusion, right? If we click on the remove mode, you'll notice now, if we stare down the barrel of these holes, that we are now drilling all the way through. Fantastic. Okay. So let's accept our changes here. And again, if we look down these holes, we can see that we've drilled all the way through. Beautiful. Now, I want to clarify a couple of things. First off, let's say I want to go back to something that I've made before. let's say that first brick extrusion. You'll notice that as I start to add features, sketches and extrusions and sketches and extrusions, if we get this list really long, it's going to be hard to tell exactly which one is which, right? So before we move on too far, this extrusion that we just made, where we drilled the holes, I'm going to right-click on the extrude title, Extrude 2, and I'm going to rename it, right? Get in the habit of doing this, right? I like to leave extrude at the beginning because then I know that it's an extrusion, even though there are icons on the left-hand side that, reiterate that point. But I'm going to call this extrude holes. Okay? Let's rename the rest of them. How about sketch holes? And then back here, this was extrude brick. And this was sketch. And let's say brick base, right? I don't know. You can name them whatever you want, just as long as it makes sense. Okay, so now that we've done this, let's say that I want to go back and edit something about the extrusion that I made before. In order to reverse time, right? We don't need to go 88 miles per hour, Doc Brown. All we need to do is double-click on the feature that we want to go back and edit. This brings us back to extrude brick, right? And you'll see that the holes have disappeared, right? Because we've gone back to a time before those holes. Now let's say, because I want to, I change this to 3 inches, right? And when I press accept, my holes reappear, but you'll notice that the holes no longer penetrate all the way through the brick. So we'll have to go back into extrude holes, right, and change the depth, or let's look into our end type options to see if we have something that'll make this easier and more flexible to changes. If we go through here, through all seems like a pretty darn good choice, right? Now, no matter how thick it is, we're going to extrude all the way through. I do want to show you one of these other ones, though, which is pretty neat. End types, though, which is pretty neat. Let's try up to face. You'll notice that the circles are the places where we are starting our extrusion. And now we want to say extrude all the way up to another face. Right? This new blue box right here, if we click on it, is going to allow us to choose a new end, an extrusion length based on a face of a part, right? And so if we click on the bottom of the cube, now the extrusion is always going to go from this circle to the bottom of the cube, wherever that's defined, right? So again, a bit of a trivial example. In fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change my extrusion down to 1 inch again, just because that 3 inches was getting a little bit too intimidating. Now we have our 3 by 5 by 1 rectangular prism with 1/2 inch holes drilled in its corners. Thus concludes this section of the hands-on activity. In the next activity, we are going to make our post.